From a guy who wanted to bring about eternal darkness because his eyes were too sensitive to light and he couldn't be asked to wear a pair of sunglasses, to a girl who wanted to bring about the end of all everything because she couldn't find literally any other use for her silly sword summoning skill, her swordmaning skill, to a guy who wants to unfurl 1,000 years of death upon some planet or another because reasons, and finally to a professional body painter and builder and amateur activist who wants to liquidate half the universe because he literally can't think of anything better to do with the power to do anything at any time all the time, like summon infinite unicorns or turn all water to Leffe, and who's thus probably too stupid to realize that killing half of all life creates more problems than it solves. What about Loki? What about Loki? That was a fickle fluke, a freak accident, and the merit of one man who managed to do Shakespeare with superheroes and approach the antagonist like an actual human being instead of a costumed Scooby-Doo villain, which later films ran with while also partially stunting the character's growth here and there. And all this brings us to her. It used to be that Marvel never managed to make another good villain since Loki, but I have to say after watching Doctor Strange 2 that that's still very much the case. Several reasons. Number one, character assassination. In the comics, Wanda Maximoff is indeed sometimes depicted as a villain. In the MCU, however, she had barely any such inclinations. Apart from her brief stint as Ultron's lackey, she's been one of the most empathetic members of the Avengers. Wasn't she traumatized about accidentally killing a few Wakandans just a few films ago? Guess the writers forgot about that part when they turned her into a mass murderer. One could argue that the pain of losing a brother, a lover, and a pair of fake children made in a Skyrim character creator would be just enough grief to drive one over the edge, and one would be wrong, because if that were the case, we'd all be sacrificing poodles to the old gods by now. There is such a thing as the devouring mother archetype, which the film is clearly swinging for, but misses and ends up caricaturizing both the archetype and the character that it once portrayed more competently, which takes me to my second point. Number two, Marvel pretends to understand women. Between She-Hulk, She-Thor, and too many Ms. Captain Marvels to keep track of, it's clear that the MCU is pandering to women as hard as it possibly can, which is the first mistake when it comes to catering to women, because I have a hard time picturing a girl who's already into superheroes get even more into them because they're now all women. If anything, it'll likely have the opposite effect. Similarly, women who aren't into superhero films won't get into superhero films just because they're now all the same gender as them. This also applies to the stories being told. Less heroes' journeys now, more slice of life and motherhood stuff, which is fine. It's bloody difficult to do, but it's viable. But Marvel can't do them because I don't think they understand women very well. Because women don't need to be deliberately catered to, as mentioned earlier, but also because the feminine at a fundamental level is defined by a compassion for life. All life. And you don't really get a sense of that in Wanda's stint as MCU villain number 425. The mother is indeed willing to kill to protect her children, but considers it a travesty since they're all about life, youth, and renewal, all things which children are an expression of. All this makes Wanda tough to take seriously as a character as she liquidates hundreds and endangers realities for the sake of a couple imaginary kids. This is not character depth, it's rubbish. Plus, if your goal is to shine a positive light on women, then why have you chosen a powerful woman and a mother, I guess fake mother, as your antagonist? It sends kind of a mixed message. This is rhetorical, of course, because what Marvel is chasing is actually not women at all. It's trends, which doesn't make things any better since the woman empowerment and meme too movements seem to be dying out, or at least received a significant blow recently, which makes Disney Marvel look all the more stupid because since they put all their eggs in this basket, they now have to commit. Third reason is she's surprisingly one-dimensional. For all the lofty terms associated with her like mother and ex-Avenger, she never once questions what she's doing until the very end. She doesn't seem broken up about it, there's no inner conflict, and conflict is basically what made Loki interesting. It wasn't so much that he was, from his perspective, wronged by his family, but the fact that there were glimpses of second thoughts as he was carrying out his plans. In spite of his determination and the acting and the facade of regret, there was always at least a hint of actual regret underneath it all. And no, this is not something that's only doable over the span of multiple films. Thor 1 had all of these elements in one movie. I swear that movie doesn't get enough credit. Wanda is so single-minded in her quest that she reminds me not of this guy, but this guy, or any number of disposable villains that came before her. Number 4, she overshadows the hero. Despite his name being in the title, Doctor Strange felt like a tourist in his own movie. So much screen time was devoted to the Scarlet Witch plot, or the Wandering Gypsy, or the pointless Illuminati section that it stopped feeling like a Doctor Strange movie. Steven was a glorified first responder for the most of it, putting out fires left and right, and whatever arc they had prepared for him had a beginning and an end, but no middle. Perhaps they should have renamed this to Scarlet Witch in the Multiverse of Madness, kept Strange as a significant side character, he's good at that, and give Wanda a cathartic redemption act at the end. Or just don't make it at all. And I could probably barf out more reasons, but I can't be bothered to. A story is only as good as its villain is a rule that the MCU has successfully sidestepped by making wildly successful, entertaining films with great heroes and shit villains, but they practically backed themselves into a corner where, by the nature of this film, they needed to respect that rule, and the result was something as tangible as Wanda's imaginary children. Huzzah. Also, wouldn't it have made more sense for Wanda and Strange to hook up since they're more or less the only two people who can relate to one another? Just a thought.